The shadow came without warning. It fell over the city of Chicago like a dark blanket covering the sun. People stopped in the streets and looked up at the sky. What they saw made their hearts stop beating for a moment. A ship hung in the air above them. It was bigger than anything they had ever seen. It was bigger than the tallest building in the city. It was bigger than 10 football stadiums put together. And it was not alone. Lieutenant Wells was sitting at her desk in a small military base in Nevada when her computer screen started going crazy. Red lights flashed everywhere. Warning sounds filled the room. She looked at the radar and saw something impossible. Hundreds of objects were entering the atmosphere all around the world. They were not meteors. They were not satellites. They were ships. Alien ships. She picked up her phone and called her commander. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. She had trained for emergencies her whole career, but nothing had prepared her for this. Within 1 hour, 12 massive vessels had positioned themselves above the largest cities on Earth. New York, London, Tokyo, Beijing, Moscow, Sydney. Each city now had its own alien shadow blocking out the sun. The world held its breath and waited. Commander stood on the bridge of his harvester ship and looked down at the blue planet below. He felt nothing but cold satisfaction. His species, had been conquering worlds for 10,000 years. They had taken 47 planets and enslaved billions of creatures across the galaxy. Earth would be number 48. It would be easy. It was always easy. They had watched humanity for 3 years before coming. They had studied their weapons, their governments, their societies. They had seen everything they needed to see. Humans were weak. They fought among themselves over invisible lines on maps. They destroyed their own environment. They still used primitive technology that burned dead plants for energy. They would make perfect slaves for the mining colonies back home. Pressed a button on his console. His message would be sent to every device on the planet. Every phone, every television, every computer, every radio would carry his words. He spoke calmly because he had given this speech many times before. Creatures of Earth, you have been selected for service to the Empire. Resistance is mathematically futile. Your weapons cannot penetrate our shields. Your militaries cannot match our technology. You will be processed and transported to your new work assignments. This is not a negotiation. This is not a request. This is your new reality. Accept it and you will be treated fairly. Resist and you will suffer. The choice is yours, but the outcome is certain. The message ended, sat back in his chair and waited. He knew what would happen next. He had seen it 47 times before. First there would be panic. Then there would be attempts at communication. Then there would be small acts of resistance. Then there would be examples made. Then there would be surrender. It was always the same. Every species followed the same pattern. Humans would be no different. In homes and offices and streets around the world, people heard the message and felt fear like they had never known. Some ran. Some hid. Some held their families close and cried. Some prayed to gods they had forgotten about. Some refused to believe what was happening. They told themselves it was a hoax or a movie promotion or a bad dream. But in the Pentagon, in a secure room deep underground, General Jack listened to the alien message with a very different expression on his face. He was not afraid. He was not panicked. He was thinking. Was 62 years old. He had fought in 3 wars. He had seen the worst things that humans could do to each other. He had buried friends and sent young soldiers to their deaths. He knew what war looked like. He knew what it cost. And he knew something that the aliens did not know. He knew what humans were capable of when they had no choice but to fight. "Sir, what do we do?" asked a young officer standing beside him. The officer was pale and his voice was trembling. Looked at the screens showing the alien ships hovering over cities around the world. He thought about his. He thought about every person on the planet who was looking up at the sky right now and feeling hopeless. "We do what we have always done," said quietly. "We fight." "But sir, you heard what they said. Their shields, their weapons. We cannot match their technology." Turned to look at the young officer. His eyes were hard but not cruel. They were the eyes of a man who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. "Son, let me tell you something about humanity. We have been fighting since before we could walk upright. We fought animals that were bigger and stronger than us. We fought nature itself. We fought ice ages and plagues and famines. We fought each other for thousands of years. And we are still here. Every single threat that has ever tried to wipe us out has failed. You know why?" The officer shook his head. "Because we do not know how to quit. We do not know how to give up. It is not in our nature. These aliens think they know what we are. They looked at us from space and saw our wars and our pollution and our stupidity. They saw divided nations and petty conflicts. They think we are weak because we fight each other, but they are wrong. They are so wrong." Turn back to the screens. They see our fighting as weakness, but fighting is what we do best. And now, for the first time in human history, we have a common enemy. Every nation, every military, every person on this planet now has the same goal. These aliens just united the entire human race against them. They have no idea what they just woke up. He picked up a phone and began making calls. Within hours, a global resistance network was forming. Old enemies became allies. Secrets were shared. Resources were pooled. The nations of Earth stopped fighting each other and started preparing to fight together. They expected fear and submission. They expected humanity to follow the same pattern as every other species they had conquered. They expected easy prey. They were about to learn that they had made a terrible mistake. They began their harvest on the fourth day. They sent down landing craft filled with soldiers. Each soldier stood 8 feet tall and wore black armor that seemed to drink in the light. They carried weapons that could turn a human being into ash with a single shot. They moved with the confidence of predators who had never met anything that could hurt them. The first landing happened in Moscow. A harvester craft touched down in Red Square and 50 soldiers marched out in perfect formation. They expected the humans to run. They expected screaming and chaos and easy captures. What they got was silence. The square was empty, the buildings were dark, the streets were quiet. The commander looked around with confusion. Where were the humans? Their scans showed thousands of life signs in the surrounding buildings. Why were they hiding? The answer came in the form of a bottle filled with burning liquid. It flew from a window and shattered against the lead soldier. The flames spread across his armor. It did not hurt him. Armor could withstand temperatures that would melt steel. But the fire was not meant to hurt him. It was meant to blind him. In that moment of confusion, the humans attacked from everywhere at once. They came from windows and doorways and manholes in the street. They carried hunting rifles and kitchen knives and metal pipes and homemade bombs. They were not soldiers. They were teachers and factory workers and grandmothers and teenagers. They were ordinary people who had decided that they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. They killed many of them. Their weapons turned brave men and women into dust, but the humans kept coming. They climbed onto the backs of the alien soldiers and stabbed at the gaps in their armor. They threw themselves onto weapons to give their friends a few more seconds to fight. They died by the dozens, but they kept fighting. When it was over, 7 soldiers lay dead on the ground. 43 soldiers were wounded. The humans had lost over 200 people, but they had proven something important. The aliens could be killed. News of the Moscow attack spread around the world within hours. It spread through whispered conversations and hidden radio signals and coded messages. The aliens could be killed. They could bleed. They could die. This changed everything. In Tokyo, resistance fighters used the subway tunnels to move unseen beneath the city. They waited until patrols entered the underground stations looking for hiding humans. Then they collapsed the tunnels on top of them. The aliens had shields that could stop missiles, but they could not stop 1,000,000 tons of concrete falling on their heads. In Texas, a rancher named Daniel Price watched the land near his property. He was 73 years old. His wife had died 2 years ago. His children lived in other states. He had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. He spent 2 days filling his old pickup truck with fertilizer and diesel fuel. He wired it all together with trembling hands and a steady heart. Then he drove straight at the alien landing craft at full speed. The explosion killed Daniel Price instantly. It also killed 32 soldiers and destroyed their entire landing craft. The blast was seen from 20 miles away. Commander received the reports from Earth with growing concern. This was not how things were supposed to go. On other worlds, the first few days of harvest were always the easiest. Local populations were too shocked and scared to resist effectively. By the time they organized, they had already taken control of all strategic locations. But these humans were different. They were fighting back immediately. They were fighting back everywhere. They were fighting with weapons that should not be able to hurt soldiers, and they were dying in huge numbers, but they were not stopping. "Explain this to me," demanded of his science officer. "Their biological responses should be triggering flight and submission behaviors. Our psychological models predicted mass surrender within 72 hours. Why are they still fighting?" The science officer studied his data screens with obvious confusion. "Commander, I do not understand it either. They are experiencing fear. Our sensors confirm extreme stress responses in every human we encounter, but the fear is not making them run or surrender. It seems to be making them fight harder." "That is impossible. Fear is meant to protect organisms from danger. It should make them avoid threats, not attack them." "I agree, Commander, and yet the evidence is clear. These humans are afraid, but they are attacking us anyway. I have never seen anything like it." Turned to look out at the planet below. He had conquered 47 worlds. He had broken species that were far more advanced than these primitive humans. He had faced enemies with better weapons and better technology and better organization. But he had never faced an enemy that fought like this. On the ground, Sergeant Cole led a small group of Marines through the burning ruins of Los Angeles. They had been cut off from their base for 2 days. Their radios were destroyed. Half of her team was wounded. They had almost no ammunition left. They had not slept in 48 hours. In that time, they had killed 107 soldiers. Was 29 years old. She had joined the Marines because she wanted to make a difference in the world. She had never imagined that she would be fighting aliens in the streets of an American city. But here she was, and she was not going to stop. "Sergeant, we are out of bullets," said Private Santos. He was 19 years old and scared out of his mind, but he was still standing. He was still fighting. Looked at her team. 5 Marines left out of 12. 3 of them were wounded. They had 2 rifles with no ammunition, 4 pistols with a few rounds each, and a collection of knives and tools they had picked up along the way. "Then we find more," she said. "We take them from the dead aliens. We keep fighting until we cannot fight anymore. That is what Marines do. That is what humans do." Nodded. His fear was still there, but something else was growing alongside it. Pride, determination, the knowledge that he was part of something bigger than himself. They moved out into the darkness, hunting for enemies. Somewhere above them, alien commanders were trying to understand why their perfect plan was falling apart. Somewhere in the ruins, other groups of humans were doing the same thing. Fighting, surviving, refusing to give up. The harvest was not going according to plan, and it was only going to get worse for the deep beneath the mountains of Colorado. Dr. Lisa Grant had not seen sunlight in 3 weeks. She worked in an underground laboratory that had been built during the Cold War to survive nuclear attacks. Now it was being used to study something far more dangerous than nuclear weapons. On the table in front of her lay pieces of armor recovered from dead alien soldiers. Lisa was a materials scientist. She had spent her career studying metals and plastics and composites. She knew how things were made and how they could be broken. And now she was trying to find a way to break the aliens. The armor was incredible. It was lighter than aluminum but stronger than anything she had ever tested. It could stop bullets and blades and fire without showing a scratch. The aliens wore this armor like humans wore cotton shirts. It seemed impossible to defeat. But Lisa knew that nothing was truly impossible. Everything had a weakness. She just had to find it. She worked day and night, sleeping only when her body refused to stay awake any longer. She ran thousands of tests. She tried everything she could think of. And finally, after 18 days of failure, she found something. The armor uses electromagnetic fields, she explained to the military council through a secure video link. It generates a barrier that repels physical objects. Bullets, explosions, even extreme temperatures are deflected by this field. But the field has a specific frequency. If we can match that frequency with a concentrated energy burst, we can overload the field and punch through. General leaned forward in his chair. You are saying we can build weapons that will work against their armor? Yes, it will not be easy. The technology is beyond anything we have ever made before. But I believe we can do it. We can use modified directed energy systems. Basically, very powerful focused beams that vibrate at the right frequency to cancel out their shields. How long will it take? Weeks, maybe months for something reliable, but we can have crude prototypes in days. They will be heavy and they will overheat quickly, but they will work. DeWitt said, whatever you need, you will have it. Lisa nodded and ended the call. She turned back to her work with new energy. For the first time since the invasion began, she felt hope. Meanwhile, in a different underground bunker on the other side of the country, a young man named Chris Blake was fighting a different kind of battle. Chris was a cybersecurity expert. Before the invasion, he had worked for a technology company finding weaknesses in computer systems. Now he was using those same skills against the aliens. Chris had managed to tap into communication signals. At first, he could not understand anything. The alien language was completely foreign, but over time, with help from linguists and cryptographers from around the world, patterns began to emerge. What they discovered was shocking. They have no encryption, Chris reported to the Resistance Council. None at all. Their communications are completely open. That cannot be right, said one of the generals. Every military in history has used codes and ciphers. Not this one. I have been studying their species. They communicate through chemical signals naturally, pheromones and scent markers. It is physically impossible for them to lie to each other. Deception simply does not exist in their culture. They never developed encryption because they never needed it. They do not understand that we can listen to them. The implications were enormous. The resistance could hear every order they gave. They could know about attacks before they happened. They could track troop movements and supply lines and command structures. The aliens had handed them a weapon more powerful than any gun. General authorized Operation Blackout. Human forces began coordinating their attacks based on intercepted alien communications. When patrols went out, resistance fighters were waiting for them. When supply ships landed, ambushes were ready. When commanders gave orders, humans already knew what those orders were. The change was immediate. In the first week of Operation Blackout, human casualties dropped by 60%. Casualties nearly tripled. Battles that should have been massacres turned into victories. Commander watched his reports with growing despair. His forces were dying at impossible rates. Every patrol was being ambushed. Every supply line was being attacked. It was as if the humans knew exactly what he was going to do before he did it. How are they doing this? He demanded. They should not be able to fight like this. Their technology is primitive. Their weapons are weak. How are they killing so many of us? None of his officers had answers. They had never faced an enemy like this. They had never faced an enemy that adapted so quickly, that learned so fast, that turned every weakness into a weapon. On the ground, the new energy weapons began reaching resistance fighters. They were ugly things, bulky and awkward, held together with tape and wire. They overheated after a few shots and sometimes exploded in the hands of the people using them. But they worked. For the first time, human fighters could kill soldiers without sacrificing their own lives in the process. Sergeant Cole was among the first to receive one of the new weapons. She tested it on a patrol outside Sacramento. The beam hit the lead alien directly in the chest. For a moment, nothing happened. Then his shield flickered and died. Then the beam punched through his armor like it was made of paper. The alien fell. His companions tried to run. They did not make it far. Looked down at the weapon in her hands. It was heavy and it had nearly burned her fingers, but she was smiling. "Now we have a chance," she whispered. Around the world, the tide was beginning to turn. Humans were still dying in large numbers. The aliens still held the cities and the skis, but hope was spreading. Weapons that worked were reaching the fighters who needed them. Information was flowing freely while the enemy remained blind. They had expected an easy conquest. They had expected to harvest a primitive species and move on to the next world. Instead, they had woken something terrible. They had united humanity against a common enemy, and humanity was proving to be far more dangerous than anyone had ever imagined. The war was far from over, but for the first time the humans were not just surviving, they were winning. Commander stood alone in his quarters and stared at the holographic map of Earth. Red markers showed where his forces had been destroyed. Yellow markers showed ongoing battles. Green markers showed areas under control. 2 months ago, the map had been mostly green. Now it was covered in red and yellow. He had lost more soldiers on this one planet than in his previous 5 conquests combined. His harvester ships were damaged. His supplies were running low. The reinforcement fleet was still months away. Something had to change. He called his senior officers to the command room. They arrived quickly, their faces showing the same exhaustion and confusion that felt. None of them had ever experienced anything like this. "We need to send a message," said. "The humans are winning because they believe they can win. We need to destroy that belief. We need to show them what happens when they resist the Empire." "What do you suggest, Commander?" asked his tactical officer. "We will make an example. We will choose a center of their resistance and we will erase it completely. No survivors, no mercy. We will show them that their courage means nothing against our power." Studied the map. His intelligence officers had identified Denver, Colorado as a major hub of human resistance activity. The underground facility where Dr. Lisa Grant had developed the shield-breaking weapons was somewhere in that region. Resistance leaders coordinated operations from hidden locations in the mountains nearby. "Denver," he said, "we will destroy Denver." His officers nodded. None of them questioned the order. They had done this before on other worlds. Sometimes, breaking the spirit of a species required breaking their cities first. Sent his final warning to the humans. His message was broadcast to every device that could still receive signals. "Humans of Earth, your resistance has been noted. It is now over. You will surrender all resistance leaders to us within 12 hours. If you do not, we will demonstrate the full power of the Empire. The city you call Denver will be completely destroyed. Every man, woman, and child within its boundaries will die. This is your final warning. Choose wisely." The message reached Resistance headquarters within minutes. General and his staff stared at the screens in horror. They knew the aliens could do what they threatened. They had the weapons. They had no morality to stop them. "We cannot surrender our people," said quietly, "but we cannot let millions die either." "There may be nothing we can do," said one of his aides. "We do not have the weapons to stop their ships, not yet." The room fell silent. The weight of impossible choices pressed down on everyone. Then a voice came through on the communication channel. It was a former school teacher who had become one of the most effective resistance commanders in the Western region. She had been coordinating fighters in the Rocky Mountain area for weeks. "I am going to respond to them," she said. "I am going to speak for all of us." Wait started, but had already begun. She hijacked the communication frequency using techniques that Chris Blake had taught her. Her voice went out to every alien ship in orbit and every human still able to listen. Commander, my name is, I am a teacher. Or I was before you came. I taught children how to read and write and think for themselves. Now I teach adults how to fight and survive and kill invaders. You want us to surrender our leaders to you. You want us to give up our hope so you can crush us more easily. But I have something to tell you. Her voice was steady. There was no fear in it, only cold, hard truth. You came to our world uninvited. You declared us slaves before you even spoke to us. You killed our people in the streets. You bombed our cities. You murdered our children in front of their parents. And now you threaten us with more death if we do not obey. Let me tell you something about the people you are trying to enslave. We have spent our entire history fighting. We fought ice and fire and plague and famine. We fought animals that wanted to eat us. We fought each other over land and ideas and pride. We crawled through mud and blood and ash for 10,000 years just to survive. Your empire is old and powerful, but you have forgotten what it means to struggle for survival. We have not. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was like iron. So go ahead, destroy Denver, kill 3 million people, make your example, and then watch what happens. Watch as every single human being on this planet stops caring about their own survival. Watch as we throw ourselves at your soldiers with our bare hands. Watch as we destroy every ship and every soldier and every piece of equipment you have, even if it costs us everything. You think you can break us with fear. You are wrong. You just reminded us why we fight. We fight because we would rather die free than live as slaves. That is not something you can bomb out of us. That is who we are. She took a breath. You wanted our surrender. Here is our answer. We will never stop. Not until you are gone or we are dead. Every last one of us. That is not a threat. That is a promise. The transmission ended. Gave the order. Denver burned. 3 million people died in fire and light. The city that had stood for nearly 200 years was reduced to glass and ash in minutes. The mountains themselves seemed to weep as the shockwaves rolled across the land. The next morning, ground forces across the planet reported something unprecedented. Human attacks had increased by 300% overnight. Resistance fighters were no longer trying to survive engagements. They were charging directly at positions. They were strapping bombs to their bodies and running at enemy lines. They were fighting with a fury that made everything before look like a warm-up. Read the reports with trembling hands. He had made his example. He had shown the humans what the Empire could do. And instead of breaking them, he had unleashed something terrible. Counselor and elder advisor approached him carefully. Commander, I fear we have made a grave miscalculation. What do you mean? When we killed those people, we did not break the humans. We removed the last thing that was holding them back. They were fighting to protect their families, their homes, their futures. Now they are fighting for revenge. And a human seeking revenge is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. Looked out at the planet below. For the first time in his long career, he felt true fear. He had not broken humanity. He had made them angry. 6 months had passed since the aliens first appeared in the sky. 6 months of blood and fire and death. 6 months of humanity learning how to fight an enemy from the stars. The lessons had been paid for with millions of lives, but the students had learned well. The underground factories were running day and night now. Dr. Lisa Grant had trained hundreds of engineers to build the shield-breaking weapons. Each week, the designs got better. The weapons got smaller and more reliable. Production increased from dozens to hundreds to thousands. Human scientists had taken apart captured technology piece by piece. They had learned how the alien shields worked. They had learned how the alien engines worked. They had learned how to turn the enemy's own tools against them. The first human anti-ship missiles were ugly things, built in basements and caves using parts scavenged from 100 different sources. But they worked. They could lock onto vessels and punch through their shields. For the first time, humans could threaten the ships that hung in the sky like arrogant gods. Admiral Sam Turner commanded what remained of the United States Navy. Most of his ships had been destroyed in the first weeks of the invasion, but he had hidden a small fleet in the deep waters of the Atlantic, waiting for the right moment to strike. That moment had finally come. 3 harvester ships were retreating toward orbit. They were damaged and running low on power. Commander had ordered them to withdraw and regroup with the main fleet. They never made it. Turner's fleet emerged from the depths like sharks smelling blood. The ships were loaded with the new missiles. The crews had trained for weeks for this exact moment. All ships weapons free, Turner commanded. 40 missiles launched in rapid sequence. The shields flickered and flashed as they tried to deflect the incoming weapons. But these were not ordinary missiles. They had been built specifically to kill these ships. The first harvester exploded in a ball of white fire. The second tried to climb higher into the atmosphere but took 7 direct hits and broke apart. The third attempted to fight back, but human missiles were faster than weapons could track. When the battle ended, 3 alien ships were debris falling into the ocean. Not a single human vessel had been lost. News of the victory spread across the world within hours. For the first time, humanity had destroyed enemy ships. The gods could bleed. The gods could die. Commander received word of the loss while planning his next ground offensive. He said nothing for a long moment. Then he quietly ordered all remaining ships to consolidate around his command vessel. The harvest was over. Now he was fighting for survival. But humanity was not finished. Captain Cole had been promoted twice since the invasion began. She now led a special operations unit trained specifically for boarding actions. They had practiced on captured equipment until they knew the alien ships better than the aliens did. When the human fleet surrounded the last vessels, and her team were ready. "Boarding craft away," she reported as her shuttle launched toward the nearest enemy ship. "We are going to take this one intact." The fighting inside the alien vessel was brutal. Soldiers were larger and stronger than humans, but humans had been killing things larger and stronger than themselves for 1,000,000 years. They knew how to fight in tight spaces. They knew how to use the environment against their enemies. They knew that the first rule of combat was that there were no rules. Led her team through corridors painted with alien blood. They cleared room after room, deck after deck. They fought hard, but they were not used to defending their own ships. They had never needed to. When reached the bridge, she found the ship's commander waiting for her. He was old for his scales graying and his movements slow. He held no weapon. "You have won," he said in broken human language. "This ship is yours." Kept her weapon trained on him. "Where is your navigation data, your star charts?" The old alien pointed to a console. "There, everything, our colonies, our trade routes, all of it." Nodded to her technical specialist, who immediately began downloading everything. "Why are you giving this to us?" she asked. "Why not destroy it?" The old alien made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Because my people need to know what happened here. They need to know what you are. Maybe then they will leave this part of the galaxy alone forever." Thought about Denver. She thought about the millions who had died. She thought about who had been killed leading a raid 3 weeks after her famous broadcast. "Yes," she said, "they do need to know." Commander made his final stand aboard his orbital command station. His fleet was destroyed. His soldiers were dead or captured. He had only 4 ships left, and they were surrounded by human vessels that should not have been able to touch them. General sent him one last message. "Commander, your remaining ships are surrounded. You have 2 options. Surrender unconditionally and face judgment for your crimes against humanity, or attempt to flee and be destroyed. There will be no negotiation." Considered his choices. His empire had never surrendered. In 10,000 years, no commander had ever accepted defeat. The shame would follow his family for generations. He gave the order to charge the human blockade. His ships accelerated toward Earth, weapons firing wildly. Human vessels moved to intercept. Missiles launched. Energy beams crossed the void. The last ships died somewhere between Earth and its moon. Their debris would orbit the planet for centuries, a permanent reminder of what had happened. 20 years later, the first human deep space exploration vessel launched from Earth. It was named Defiance. Commander Wells stood on the bridge. She was older now, her hair gray and her face lined with years of hard service. But her eyes were the same eyes that had first seen the alien ships on her radar screens. She had lived to see this moment. The ship carried a message. It was broadcast continuously in every known galactic language, powered by technology humanity had built from the ashes of its enemies. To any species who receives this transmission, we are humanity. We come from a small blue world in an unremarkable star system. 20 years ago, an empire came to enslave us. We destroyed them. We are now exploring the galaxy. We do not seek conflict. We do not desire conquest. We offer friendship to all who offer it to us. But hear our warning clearly. If you come to us seeking war, we will give you war. If you threaten our people, we will end yours. We do not forget attacks against us. We do not forgive those who harm our children. And we never, ever surrender. Remember what happens to those who threaten humanity. The message spread across the stars. Ancient civilizations listened. Young empires took note. Species that had never met humans learned their name and their nature. And somewhere in the depths of space, beings who had once considered Earth as a target quietly crossed it off their lists forever. Humanity was no longer prey. Humanity was awake. And the galaxy would never be the same.